the points that we like to discuss further, but I'd also like the first comments and observations from Dr. Gupta, who's also joined us. Dr. Gupta, from an economic perspective, let's also talk about trade between the two nations. We've seen the initial benefits of this economic cooperation and trade agreement that we have going on with Australia. However, let's look at the realistic timelines. Let's look and talk about if it can be, in fact, leveled up to a more strategic economic cooperation between both the nations, and how much of trade are you going to see between these two nations after Prime Minister Modi's visit?
Thanks for having me here. I think Singhal Sahab has very comprehensively talked about the visit and what it is likely to do. What I would like to actually talk about is that India is basically now building relationships with all different countries, and every day there is a new country which we are building relationships with, which is very, very important because from a geopolitics perspective, one is that, that also shows that India is a country now that everybody wants to have relationships with. It's not a one-way process, it's a two-way process. So everybody wishes to have relationships with India, which is a very, very important aspect. We are part of the Quad, Australia is part of the Quad, and this is going to strengthen the relationships of Quad. Another thing which probably has happened during these last 2 years is that because of Trump trying to do certain things on tariffs and trying to look at the world in a certain manner, the other countries are, to my mind, trying to get closer so that they form a stronger relationship with each other. And that is what is happening. What India would be gaining from Australia, Australia has rare earths. Today, when you talk about EVs and when you talk about the next wave of clean automobiles and so on and so forth, rare earths is an important area to have. I mean, you need rare earth to make these things. So we have closer relationships with Australia would lead us to more imports of that kind. Number two, I have always felt that, when you change the relationship to a strategic partnership, because I don't think, as a country, we would be just wanting to import more. We would be wanting more relationships where technology transfer can happen, where their companies can come and invest in India. And I think those are things which are going to get a kind of boost because of this visit of the Prime Minister. So that is something which is very, very important. I think India is sitting at a very, very wonderful position today where, everybody knows that we are the largest growing economy. And some of these countries, if you really look at them, Australia, etc., their own population is not so high. So for their companies also, it is important that they go and set their footprints in other countries. And I think India being the largest consumer base, and now that we are at a tipping point where I always keep saying once you kind of cross that 2,500, 3,000 per capita income, you are at a tipping point of a lot of things in terms of consumers and in terms of spending capability and so on and so forth. So I'm sure that their companies would also be looking forward to setting up their bases here in the country. I think some of their largest mining companies like Rio Tinto, etc., would be also looking at India with great hope. So all in all, I think this will be a great relationship to take forward. And as Singhal Sahab said, there is a lot to do in terms of security issues, maritime, where they are already ahead of us in terms of technology, etc. And I think India will have a lot of role to play in terms of IT, ITES, etc. for their country. So I think it's all in all a very, very wonderful thing that is happening. That's all that one can say about it.
Absolutely. So please do stay on.